Hey there everyone, I hope you are all doing good. Stasma here. Today we can finally take a look at the 259T programmable complex waveform generator by Buchla and Tiptop Audio. This video is sponsored by Tiptop Audio as they sent me the 259T in advance so I can show it to you. Many thanks, Tiptop Audio. If this thing looks familiar to you, it's because it's the module that inspired what became in eurorack the DPO by Make Noise, the complex oscillator by Verbos, the Brenso by Frap tool, and many other what's called complex oscillator. And this is the one that basically started it. You can consider the one that's sitting next to it, the 258T, as the primitive version of this. Even though you might be familiar with this, I will give you a brief tour because there's quite a lot going on here. Whatever, it's nice to just know where we are. Now I have took my trusty Tracker Plus that you can see a little bit over there. There was no very easy solution to film this properly, so whatever. I have some breakbeats into this and I'm sending MIDI out to a MIDI converter box. The MIDI thing 2 by Befacco in the little pod over there. And I'm using it to sequence the 259 on top of a nice broken jungle rhythmic that I like. I like to have something that I can interact with. This is a very simple patch. Yet it does sound pretty good. And one thing I've done as well is to sample some more complex sounds into the tracker. So this infamous bass was also made with the 259. I just sampled the notes that I wanted and replaying them. Which means I can have both at the same time. I also made another pattern with other samples. More melodic ones. And the same patch going, but now played much lower, which make a nice wubby bass. Fun stuff as well. It is a dual oscillator, which means you have two independent sound generator. The original one, and as this one is kind of very based on the original. As this oscillator called the principal one, which is mainly here to be used as an audio source. And this one, the modulation oscillator, as its name suggests, is made to modulate this one. But there is nothing stopping you from using this one as a sound generator as well. I've always considered all this kind of complex oscillator as being instruments. They are like a synth. It's an instrument in its own, as opposite as the Moog or East Coast kind of philosophy. Does not require you to patch multiple oscillator to somewhere and then to a filter and stuff. It's just everything is pre-patched there. So you can create very weird sound very quickly. Okay, so let's listen to the final output. So far, I have a very simple sine wave. But as soon as I start to mess around with this section, I have more. I also have square and sine. And nothing should stop you from mixing all this together. But on its own, you can straight away tell the modulation oscillator to interact with some of the parameters of the principal one. The mod bus here is where you choose the parameter you want to modulate with this oscillator, how much you want it, and you have control over it. Of course, also here you have control over everything. Only the timbre knob does have an attenuator though, but if you really need one, you can use either the 250-70 or whatever other control voltage processor you might have. Okay, so let's decide, for example, that I want to change the volume of this output. I can select amplitude modulation. Set this one to low, so it will be a low frequency oscillator, an LFO. And the mod index is going to be how much the triangle wave of this oscillator modulates the volume of the final output. It does not work with the other output. So this is effectively modulating a VCA that's after the timbre section. You can do this at audio rate, of course. And depending on the waveform you choose, you will have different results. Modulate the amount. We'll see that more deeply in some sort of exploration of the weird complex waveform that's going to be after this presentation. We can modulate the amplitude. We can also modulate the frequency. So the pitch of this oscillator can be affected by this one. It goes, it's quite okay out in tune until it starts to very mess around with the fundamental frequency of the oscillator. And that's great when you want hardcore sound effects, stuff like this. In the original, there was no way of modulating the modulation one with the main one, but we are in eurorack, so we can. So we can do crazy cross-mod stuff. I love this kind of patch. Go back to something more conservative. A little trick that I like to try is to use the CV out of the oscillator to control the mod index. Which makes the modulation some sort of exponential. Makes weird stuff, I like it. Finally, so as I say, we have amplitude, pitch, and timbre, which is going to modulate this parameter. Go for a very slow triangle wave. You cannot use this part at all, like I said. Use this one in high mode. And you can use either a triangle output as a new sound source, or this output that has selectable wave shapes. Triangle, square, and sawtooth. This phase lock lets you lock the phase of the modulation oscillator on the principal one, which in most cases will result in less beating. It's not out sync. It does create some nice artifacts, but very much softer than out sync. You can patch the other way around. This one locks much more. I really like to combine the two, to be honest. And either when you're combining the two, like right now, you can still use this one to modulate the other. I like those switches as some sort of a performance tool. Here we have everything that's related to external frequency control of both oscillators. So AC coupled linear FM input, the keyboard or art input. We are going to talk about art a little bit after for both, and also an exponential FM input. If you're not familiar with this, the AC coupled FM input is more for frequency modulation at audio rate. Let's say it's more like to make FM synthesis the old school way. Well, the CV input, the black one, is more to send control such as sequencers, envelope, and stuff like this. This is FM the classic way. Exponential FM is much deeper. Also reacts much more to envelopes and basically anything that's DC coupled, anything that's below our hearing frequency. If I send this here, it's much more tamed. On the modulation oscillator, you have that blue output that is actually made to be used as a modulation source for the rest of your system. This one is different than the two others that are -5 to +5 volts. The CV1 is unipolar from 0 to 10 volt. As we are in eurorack here, we can still use both as modulation sources. Just mind that the voltage is different. Now let's explore some of the many weird wave shapes that can be outputted from the final output. The final output, with all the timbre section and harmonic section at 0, outputs a sine wave. The main knob is the timbre knob. This circuit is called a wave folder. As you can see looking at the scope, it folds the sine wave back on itself and it creates new harmonics from a signal without any. Which is not that far from sweeping a resonant filter, but it's kind of in the opposite direction. This way you add harmonics, while with the filter you remove them. Wherever you decide to stop on this timbre knob, the two others will have different effects. Changes the distribution between even and odd harmonics, giving small, not really dramatic change in timbres, which is perfect when you send very slow modulation into it. Low and high does make much more of a difference. It also creates some level shifts. The signal gets quieter, but also gets more fuzzy harmonics, which in the end, if you put it like this, you get some sort of a saw wave. And you have a very weird square wave. But all this being completely morphable, there is no direct selection, unlike on the modulation oscillator where you can select the wave that is outputted. Here there is an infinite blend of possibilities. And as everything is voltage controllable, it lends itself to very nice droney patch when you plug lots of slow modulation into all these. You see here there is a slight effect, but not much, because the timbre knob is still at 0. What I just did is unnecessary, but it is to show how it works. I could have directly sent that modulation oscillator to control the timbre parameter, like this, with the Modbus in the middle. You have the control over how much this oscillator is going to affect these parameters. You can modulate the timbre, the pitch, and amplitude, my personal favorite. But you can also combine more than one at the time. This being also controllable. So yeah, complex waveform generator isn't another statement. It's pretty wild how this thing looks. Okay, here is some sort of a necessary electro weirdo jam with the 259, because I find I've been using the Verbos complex oscillator for this kind of stuff quite a bit, especially using the amplitude modulation, but here both at the same time, amplitude and timbre modulation. It makes some very nice elastic, weird, bassline-ish stuff. This is without the timbre and amplitude modulation. So here I'm using the art, which means I can easily change octaves. Yeah, I have the pure square wave, just to accentuate the heaviness of things. Untreated, pure chiptune kind of stuff, but I like it. I also have a bit of G3P to give some ambience. Let me fade it in. Everything's triggered and synced by the 880, by System 80. Okay, let's check about the art stuff. I'm sure a lot of people are curious about it. One or the other or both of the oscillators can be set to art. This one has low, high, and heart. And this one, 1 volt per octave or art. So you need something that sends out something. Otherwise, you don't have any use for it. The Tiptop guys also sent me that art quantizer that allows you to turn any analog voltage into an art signal. Here is how it works. So instead of having unquantized voltages coming out of an analog sequencer such as this one, you can first send the voltage to the quantizer at the input. Send your gate to gate. And we'll see later that if you don't use the same gate source as the voltage source, it can be very interesting, especially in the Buchla environment. And then you send your output here. Let's also use a VCA in between. Whenever there's a compatible pitch received, you also get a gate that is the length of the gate you send here. We're going to send that gate out straight away to the control of the low-pass gate. If I increase the gate length on the 245T over here, I have longer gates at this output. Also, you might notice here that the steps that are at 0 are muted. So there is an internal range that's set. There's a great video that Tiptop did if you want to check it out. So yeah, that makes it very easy to make melodic stuff. You can easily remove a step. And you can use anything to modulate. Here, for example, the gate length of the steps, so you can get something a bit more dynamic. We could use a second channel of the sequencer here. But as a gate source, I'm going to send something random, so I'm going to clock the quantized random voltage of the 266T. Quantization at 1, so it will just output or not a gate. Send this to gate here. You can see we have some actions over there. Let's send this to control the modulation oscillator. I'm also going to patch it to a low-pass gate. Play at detuning a bit the oscillators. It's better if they are not phase locked. And when you're in art mode, the principal oscillator works on a 3 octaves basis. The modulation one does have more steps in its quantization, but when you want to make sure you're in tune, you just put it at 0. If you tune them a bit carefully, you can make some nice chords. Playing with the internal bass does make some nice interaction between the two voices. Many thanks to Tiptop Audio for sending this magnificent piece of hardware for me to try and demo to you. What an absolute pleasure to have this, finally, the 259 as an eurorack module, without all the bells and whistles that's been added or removed sometime as well from the other modules in eurorack that took inspiration from this one. There will be some samples, of course, as always, for Patreon subscribers. You should definitely go have a look if you want to grab some samples or get some teaching. You can also find some affiliate links in the description if you want to buy some of this stuff and support the channel at the same time. Many thanks for watching again, and see you next time. Bye bye.